Hello, how's everybody? Well, today we're going to go over Precision Part 2, and I'm going to put a number on this one. I think it's going to be 3, but I have to check out because I'm almost sure I did the introduction, and then after I did the introduction, I did a precision, and then a precision, 2 precision, so that would be 1 and 2, but I'm going to put it in a description. So it's going to be, this one should be Precision 3, okay, because I record them and then I upload it, okay. What we're going to do today is we're going to walk around, we're going to walk some more in the 5 squared. I'm going to change the 5 squared. It's going to be, I do that to keep your attention, but it's going to be A squared, okay? There's one point that I have to make, and that is that this is, it's Dance Without Music, okay? And it's, it's specific to the things that I'm doing, okay? Like what I'm saying, we build and we build and we build, but now we're on the floor, okay? And that's what we're doing the square at, the 5 square, or the A square. So everything is related to that. There's some things that I would like to add from the last one that I didn't, as far as the coordinates are concerned. There's also a coordinate here. There's a coordinate here at the top, okay? But it's a plane, okay? A plane at the top. And there's a plane at the bottom, okay? As a floor. So there's a plane there and there's a plane here. So if I go up like this, I'm moving the plane up, although the base plane stays the same, so that you can relate to when you jump or when you go up, you know the main plane and you know how much you're going up and you're going down. The plane itself, as far as, I guess I can say on the floor. Just make it simple for now. So that's the plane, okay? In the plane, we're constructing 5 squared, or we're going to get away from 5 squared, okay? Because this is specific to Dance Without Music. So it's going to be A squared. When I say that, the reason why it's very important, because it's not a computation. It's not something that you have to figure out. It's there, and when I say it, you relate to it. It's just like if I say chair, you imagine a chair, okay? So if I say A, you should imagine that sequence, okay? It is numbers, like I said, but we use number. A lot of people think that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are numbers, but they're not numbers, they're symbols to represent numbers. There's all different kinds of numbers. And to make it more basic and to make it to where you can understand where things are coming from better, is that we're now covering one part of the mathematics of Dance Without Music. It's not everything at once. We're in year 3 and we reached a lot. We did a lot of things as far as Dance Without Music is concerned. I don't expect many people to follow, like right now. It's impossible because it is a lot. And it just built, but anyway, I'm not worried about that. I know that I have to go on and I must go on. So now we're at A A. And when I say that, I'm relating something, a system that I can conceive of. And you have to be able to conceive of it also. Okay, so where should we go from there? Okay, and there's other things. So we know the plane now. We know the plane for the floor. For now, we'll call it the floor or the stage or whatever. Okay, that one pretty much is dependent upon where you are. Then we have the plane here. That's our first two planes as far as the planes are concerned. For now, I don't believe, I know because in mathematics they always say everything has a plane, everything has this, everything has that. If everything had everything, if there were planes everywhere, I mean, as far as geometry is concerned, then there wouldn't be space or knowledge or concepts for other things. Concepts have a place also. So if I say there's a plane here, you do not say that there's a plane here, there's a plane here, there's a plane here, there's a plane here. No, as far as Dance Without Music, now you see there's a plane here and there's a plane on the floor. That's it. Now we have another coordinate that I can't say I missed, but I guess you're ready for it now. There's a another coordinate, and that's right here. Okay, it goes from up here and it goes down to the floor. Now that we have a floor plane, okay, then it goes down here. So we have a plane here. Let's go over. Let's go over the coordinates, okay? Another reason why I wouldn't say that there's a plane everywhere as far as Dance Without Music is concerned, because we have other things to work with. You understand? Like, for instance, this is not a plane that goes all the way out, because it's a coordinate. It will move. It moves too much. You know what I mean? It moves this way, it moves that way, it moves this way. So we won't call that a plane. So we have a coordinate here. We have a coordinate here. Like we said, a coordinate here. Then we have an angle right here. Okay, we have a coordinate here, and then I'll call that the angle. Okay? And then we have a coordinate here, and there's another angle. We call this the natural, or the right or the correct coordinate, and this is a tool. It's a tool, as we said before. This is the tool. Then we have the story, which we went over. We have the piso here. We have the first floor, which is here. And we have the retrocé. I still have to get that spelling on it, but I'm sure I'm pronouncing it all right. The one thing that I see that's happening as far as I'm learning is that I notice that when I go about, like I'm at work or whatever, or whatever, I notice how things connect, okay? I always use a book, okay? Or let's just say this right here, okay? I pick up this thing. This is the thing I bought at, I bought this at the Museum of Art, okay? National Museum of Art, okay? And now my mind is going to be, is set at, I see, and it's not frustrating, it's not too much, it's not what you would think of, it's not, it doesn't boggle you down or anything. It's like a beauty. Like, I pick it up like this, and I know that my border, I know that there's a line here, so I know exactly where I'm at as far as when I pick this up, because I know there's an angle here, and I can conceive of what I'm doing, of where things are in space, in the cell. Let's say that you're in the cell. And then when I play this, I can Okay, like when I do that, okay, I use what we call, and we have a lot of terms if you just came in here. There's so many terms that we have to, it's 3 years of terms. You will know about the apparatus. When I do this, there's an apparatus. Before I told you there was an apparatus. You form an apparatus and you do whatever you want to do. But as you go on and you get to this stage, you can visualize the apparatus and where it's at, okay? Okay. With your coordinates, because I have my coordinates and I know where I'm at. I know if I go up. Before you used to just go up, you can go up, or maybe you wouldn't even think about it. You wouldn't have that fun. You would just go like this. But okay, so what I'm saying is that it gives you more things to work with. Before you didn't realize, like for instance, I stated before, a long time ago, about the how can I say not coordinate? Again, what was it? The quadrants. The quadrants need space and order. Like, I mean, like, I can't do anything without space. So this is, when it's moving, that's part of the, not coordinate, that's part of the, it's part of the quadrant, okay? Because quadrant needs space. So now we're at a point to where we can figure out where we are, and we can figure out the space that we need for our quadrant, okay? So I went like this because I know I'm going up. I mean, that's a story. I know I went past the story, and now I know I went past my my plane, my top plane, we can call it. We'll figure out a better name for it, but a top plane, okay? And I know that the base of the plane, the top plane, is up here, okay? I know that, okay? And I know how far I am down from my base plane, but now I brought my plane down, okay? But I know it's usually up here. And I reached up here, and I'm above my plane, okay? And then I can stay here, and I can go up, and I can bring this down, okay? What I'm saying is that it gives you, we're at a point to where it gives you more things to do. You own, you're owning now, you're owning your cell, you're owning your space around you because you understand it better. It's something that's so beautiful. And we're just here in year 3. Can you imagine, okay? And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't at year 3, okay? So now we're going to, there's 2 things I want to do. I want to explain to you about A, or and I want to, the square of it, and I also want to continue to walk into the square, okay? And there's one thing about the square that we're not familiar with, is that the square is a formula that you make in your mind. So in actuality, you're producing the formula just like if you were doing a dance. I mean, like, the formula from any dance doesn't really come from, it doesn't come from something out here or reading it or whatever, but it comes from something that we have in our mind. But this one it gives you more tools, okay? So we're going to do, we're going to walk a little bit more in the plane, but that one, walking in the plane, which we already have, and we're setting up the formula, and we're giving ourselves space. We're giving ourselves floor. I mean, we already have the floor, which is the space, but we're organizing, let's say. And the formula is helping us to organize. Then we have the function. Inside every square, like I said, we have the graph paper. The graph paper, if you think of a piece of graph paper, we're in the center of one of the squares. One of the squares, we moved up and we moved up again, okay? We moved forward and we moved forward. Or we moved from one point, we moved to another one, and another one, and we call them cells, okay? I mean, we're in our cell, and which brings up the point that, which means that we will walk from cell to cell. Yes, I may put that in it to where we're walking from one cell to another, or else we're in a cell and we're walking, you know, wherever. But we don't have to worry about that right now. So let's start on a squared. A squared. Like I said, to keep your attention, I'll say 5 squared, but I'm going to drop that pretty soon. Or and then I'm going to drop this, but that's squared. Whenever we're talking about this, we're just talking about space. That's one thing that's going to make this a little bit better too, because we're talking about space. It's just the space that we're creating. It's going to develop into other things because we have other coordinates. But remember, we have rooms. In our room that we made, the first 2 rooms are in the retroseg, okay? It's from the top, from the retroseg down to the floor plane. Let's call it this. It's kind of shaky. I mean, we might change that, but from the retroseg to the floor plane, remember there's rooms, and the rooms come from the quadrants, okay? There's a quadrant, and then we have the retroseg, and we have a room, okay? For the, oh, this is great. For the functions that occur in the below, in the retroseg, from the retroseg to the floor plane, okay? So that's what we're referring to. The reason why I'm saying that, because we're being very specific. In a lot of mathematics, you don't know where you are. You're given all these numbers, you don't know what this is, you don't know what binomial, polynomial, but you have polynomial, binomial, but what do you use it for? But we're being very, very specific, and we're basic, and we're starting from the floor, okay? So we have functions on the floor, but like I said, we're staying now on the a squared. If we square it, we have, like I said, from the last YouTube, when we square it, we have the same number of spaces as the subject is. The subject is A, okay? Times A. Whenever we say, and this is a little bit review from the last one, whenever we say A, or times itself, that means that subject, which is A, we're going to do it the same amount of times, okay? A lot of times we want to say rows and columns, but you don't want to you want to get away from that because it will trick you up. One thing about numbers, they'll trick you up, okay? Because they have personality, they have things that are unique, like I said. And I'll use this number, which we're going to drop numbers. Like I said, the number that you use for these, I showed you the characteristics of a 5, which is A. It has a center, and then it has 2 endpoints. And then from the center, we have a center to one endpoint is a center, and the center from the other endpoint is a center also. So that's a characteristic of that number. And the number, not the symbol like we write. We're talking about the spaces. So we have A. So that's one characteristic. But now we're doing the squared. Because if we have one center, that means because of the square, because we squared it, we have the same amount of centers like this in the center. So we have, as you visualize the squared, you know that you have A, okay? And it's because it's on the floor, it's going from one side to the other. A. So what we're doing now is I'm showing you to whereas we don't use symbols, but all of the spaces are different because they're in different places. That's going to be very important when it gets more complex. But it's not going to be complicated because if you stick with this, and I don't know that many people will be able to or will, then it's going to become second nature to you, okay? So, also when we're speaking of A, we are talking about the plane on the floor and the retrocé, which does the functions. However, the balance point does come up. And like I said before, the balance is something that's everywhere, okay? If there was no balance here, I wouldn't be able to sit on the chair. But I'm at a balance point in the earth. If I go stop from the earth and go all the way up, there's balance points everywhere, okay? And that we utilize for balance. And I don't know if there's a balance. Even there's a balance here on this tripod. You see a little circle. Let me see if it's balanced. I'm just checking to see. Okay. And this one is, it's about balance. But just to show you that there's a balance everywhere. You know, a tool is a tool. It has a little bubble. Well, that's to show you that there's a balance, okay? So, we're looking at the characteristics of the different spaces. When we say A, the only thing we're doing is we're giving each space a sound, okay? Which is good. But it's not realistic. The real spaces don't have, it's just the space. They're just in different places. You notice that we move, another thing too, is that, I was going to say something, but I'm changing it. It's a square also. A square is even sides. So we know that we're in a square on the floor and it has even sides. Because of that, we know that it has 4 corners. We just visualize the first corner. Let's visualize another corner, visualize the other corner, and visualize the other corner. So we have a corner here, a corner here, a corner here, a corner here. And like I said, we have a whole center line, okay? A center going all the way down. Spaces. if I were to use sounds, it would be ah, 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 ah. That's the center lines. And then we have a center going from the one side to the other side in the center. So then that would go ah, 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 okay? So basically what we're doing now is showing you that there's a difference. Whereas you would use numbers or something to relate to the spaces, what we're doing is we're seeing how the spaces, the characteristics of a squared, okay? So we have like a cross or something in it, not a cross, but it's a cross, okay, but an uneven cross. If I wanted to make it an uneven cross, I could bring the center up, okay, and use from the center point where we started to the top, I'm not going to say the top because it's on the floor, to one end, okay, the forward end, okay. There's one point I want to make real quick, is that the spaces itself have a lot of, there's a word for it, but I don't want to use it even if I do know that word, because it's got to stay basic, it's got to stay boring, yes. There's one end and there's another end. So let's talk about the ends. They have 4 corners, okay? You don't want to say top, you don't want to say bottom, you don't want to say this side or left side, but you can say it if you're speaking of your quadrant. A quadrant, because a quadrant has a front, a quadrant has an other, and a quadrant has a right or correct or natural. When we're in the center, okay, we were in the center, remember in the beginning where we started in the center of the squared, we had a front because we have, with a quadrant, we have a perspective. But without a quadrant, we don't have a perspective. So we have a concept. So there's 2 things. I can talk about the squared without a perception, and I can talk about the squared without a perception or with a perception, okay? When I talk about it with the perception, I'm talking about it with the quadrant, okay, as it relates to the quadrant. So let's relate it to the quadrant, okay? Relating it to the quadrant, we were in the center, and now because we're in the quadrant, we're in the quadrant, in the cell, with the in the squared, okay, in the square of A, that means that we have a perception, okay? Our perception, we have a forward, we have a back, we have a, I don't want to say, we don't want to say left and right, we have an other, and we have a natural, okay? So that gives us a perception, but without the quadrant, there's no perception whatsoever. There's no perception. So I'm trying to think if we should talk about it without perception first. Okay, let's talk about it without perception first. This is difficult, but we're going to go on. It's very important. Now we're in the quadrant, we're in the squared, the A squared, and that's just to denote what it is, but I don't have to talk about it anymore because we already know how many we have, how many spaces we have. So we have the space, we know that there's 4 corners, they're all the same, okay? Without perception, they're all the same, okay? there's a center point, okay? Yes, there's a center point because we're talking about a quantity and there's spaces. So there is a center. I'm trying to think, is that actually a perception saying that there's a center? I don't think so. Okay, so far we're going to use this without perception, saying that it's without perception. There's a center point, which means there's a center. Let's say this: there's all the spaces, but of all the spaces, there is a center. Okay, that's without perception. Okay. Okay. Where the center is, there's a line or a line segment that goes to this side, to one side, to the that extends from the center. So I can't say this side, because we're not in we're getting away from perception, but we're talking about uniqueness of spaces. First, we talked about uniqueness of one space, which is the center, because there's a center. Like I said, the center has four corners, and all of the whole square has 4 corners. Okay, which entails 4 of them. Now we're going to talk about a multiple number of cells. Okay, let's call them cells. Okay, so we have a whole line of cells in the center, like this. There's a center, so there's also a line in that center, which goes. I can start it anywhere, but it's just there. I don't have to count them, but there's. Okay, there's You know the number because there's a line. There's 2 of them. There's one way and there's one the other way. However, if you count all the cells from one line, okay, making in one line, you have another center, which are just and then the other one has and So you have, if you made a line of you used up that center, but then there's another line which goes in another direction of the center cell. But since you used those you only have 2 more, and that's 2 that go this. I mean, you have that goes this way and that goes that way. We're talking like this because that's the way you're gonna have to get it, okay? Because you notice when you go through your day, when you go through your daily work, you don't think about this. You don't think about this. That's how we want our mind to be. We want to be able to capture spaces without giving them any without giving them any symbols. Exactly seeing the difference in things because they're in a different space. So I just said it was going to be boring, but to me it's not boring. So let's go back. We have the center, which is 1, okay? I said we can make a lot. We could put them in one of them all together in a line, but let's not do that this time because that one was really complicated. Let's say we take the center. We're talking about the center, and we're doing this with no perception. So we have the center. So then let's say because of the center, there's from the center. Let's call it okay? I don't know if we have to call it, but let's not try and use symbols. Let's not try and just say we have that center space. From that center space, but one thing we know, Another thing that's different about them is that they're on the plane, they're on the floor plane. So we have one in the center, okay? Then from the center, there's two on either side of the center, okay? Of that center one, we have there's another one and another one. That's the way I want to speak. And on the other side, there's another one and another one. There on the other side, there's another one and another one, and on the other side, there's another one and another one. Now, the sides that they have sides. The one in the center has sides. It has, that's the only way I could say it, okay? So it has a side here, a side here, a side here, and a side there, okay? And from those sides, there's there's a space here and a space up. There's a space here and a space up. There's a space here and a space this way. There's a space here and there's a space here. Now that we got that, and this is so important, okay? This is how we have to start thinking, okay? Now from that, what are the other ones that we did not speak about? We're actually having a conversation about spaces and their difference without using the symbols for them, okay? And it's on the floor plane, so that's another difference about them, okay? So that would mean that I'm trying to think of how many more, okay? How many more do they have left that we have left? So I would think, because, so we have, okay, let's see. Okay, so the ones that we talked about, remember, on each side, okay? From here, we have the center, and then we have one here and one here, and So that means that there's, there would be we have number of times to where there's Okay, did you get it? Okay, so that means that we've talked about everything, but now we have to complete the square as far as what we're talking about. So we're talking about all the spaces. So the only spaces that we didn't talk about is that there's on the four corner, on where there's four corners, in between the corner, in between the corner of the squares, okay, and the center, and I could just say in between the corner of each corner and the corner of the center space is which is number of times spaces. So there's number of spaces. And since that we covered times, okay, because we have a corner, for the whole square we have so that's the whole squared number of spaces. And when I said I just mentioned times. So now we have on the next corner, in between the corner of the square and the corner of the center, and then of another corner, and then we go down to another corner of the center and the corner of the square, and then we have one more that we didn't mention, is the corner of the center and the corner of this, another corner of the square. In between those two is another Okay, so we spoke about every space on the floor without using numbers, and it's very, very important. Okay, because why it's important? Because when we think, in actuality, that's how we think. Because when you think to yourself, you don't have to use words. Okay, you can locate things, and that's where we want to start going. Okay, so that's finished. So now what we did was getting to know the squared, or squared, without using symbols. We threw symbols out the window, which is going to help us to recognize better the spaces and the organization of the spaces. And it's just for this, I mean, because every square is different. It's a miracle. Okay, and we've just talked about our first conversation about squared. Remember, is a subject, and we're gonna times it times itself, which is Okay, so that's finished with that. We're going to do that a lot. Sorry, but that is a conversation very important. It's just very important, you'll see. Because when you work with the coordinates and everything, you won't be able to, there's no numbers. You just have to know where you are. And as we continue this, I'll be able to explain to you a little bit better. Because if I go like this, I know I smoke, I'm sorry. If I go like this, okay, explaining it with numbers, it's just so many things that get in the way, because you're using numbers that you don't want. You're using items that are not included in your subject, okay? So that's what we're getting used to. So if I flick my hand like that, we'll be able to explain what we're doing because we don't have numbers in the way. So now we're going to walk a little bit more in the quadrant, okay? And there's one thing, we're not going to do the whole quadrant because, believe it or not, it's a lot. If I were to do this whole quadrant, I'm not ready for that, but I know I can do it now. But before, in Dance Without Music, there was 2 times that I had to stop. There was one when, and then you'll see it in my beginning tapes, I say something like a warning or something like that. That was one stop. I had to stop and recoup everything until I realized that I can't speak about gravity. We threw gravity out the window, and I was able to get this far. The next thing was when I was trying to do a quadrant thing, or I was trying to do something, what we're doing now, and I couldn't do it. I had to stop. And that took maybe like, what, 4 months? 3 or 4 months, I don't know. And now I'm back again, okay? So, now we're going to go into, that's why I was telling you that I couldn't walk the whole thing, because it is a big deal. If I place so many, over 1,000 hours to progress with this, there's no way in the world that I would do a whole video on the whole. It means that, because inside each step that we do is a function. A function is something, another world. So that's why we can only do a few at a time, because we're doing functions. Okay? It's not so much going from one space to another. The cells, we already talked about all the spaces. But the cells, what the functions that happen inside the cell are numerous. Okay, so that's where I was messing up the last time. I thought it was just steps, but it's not just steps, it's functions. Okay, we pretty much do, and I don't want to talk about the functions too much because that's, we got to keep it basic. Okay, so now I think we're going to be on a turn. We have to do a turn because of the mind. We can just start at, we're going to start at the edge where we were in the center, then we moved. Okay, now we can talk about a perception. The reason why we can talk about perception, because we're talking about a quadrant. We're in the quadrant now. We're using a quadrant, our quadrant, so now we can talk about perception. I was in the center and I moved forward, and then I moved forward again. But we know from the square that that's the edge, which means in order to continue to progress through the through the formula, we have to make a turn. Okay, so, and I want to turn to the other side. Okay, I don't know how complicated it is. I've tried to do it in my mind, but I know I can do it. So let's make this turn. Okay. And this is going on, but it's very important. I think I'm just going to do the turn. Okay. Okay. So like I said, we were in the center. We advanced one, and we advanced one. I can say one, so that's good. And then we advanced another. So we advanced. We're actually dealing with 3 spaces now inside the squared. Okay. And because it's in a formula, and because everything that I have done is I made my space. So that's the beautiful thing that I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that we have. We have that part of this. We have parts of our floor that we're creating. I have it because I completed it with the function. Okay, so now I'm going to have another one. Okay, so I'm starting in the edge in the center. Okay, I'm at the edge and I'm in the center line or center of spaces. We start at the center, and like I said, I advanced one, I advanced another. So that means that I'm on the edge. The only space I have in the function is I could go back. Okay, so I'm going to show you, I'm in the cell. Okay, now I'm in the cell. Okay, and I can move anywhere because, like I said, the formula is here. Okay, the floor is here, so I can start pretty much anywhere and state that this is where I'm going to start. So we're at the edge, and remember, we're in a cell. And the function, you need the function to operate in the cell. Okay, so I'm doing a function. This is the space I have. I'm here. I can go back, and I can go back like that. Okay, so this is what I have. But not just that, I also have, I can go back here, I have this balance point, 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 this balance point, and like I said, we're back here. So now we got to figure out a way, let's get over here. Now I got to figure out a way to make the turn, okay? And then after I do the turn, I think it's going to, I don't know if I had to close it because it's almost an hour. Okay, so the only way I can think of to make this turn into the next cell, okay, into the next cell, yes, I would have to say cell, most likely, okay, is to go back here, because I know I can move in this cell, like this, okay? And instead, Okay, so I can go back, but this time I want to make it because I want to. Okay, so like I know there's a balance point here. Okay, so I can take this balance point, and then I want to turn. Okay, so what I did was I was going forward because we have a perception, because we have a quadrant, and then I'm turning my retroseg. Can I say I'm turning the retroseg? Yes, I could say I'm turning the retroseg to the other side, okay? And then I can bring this retroseg here. So remember we have the rooms below the retroseg. So I turn this room and I turn this room. So now I am turned, okay? So that means in this cell, I could go like this. I can go like this, okay? I can go like this. Okay, so that gives me another function. So we have another function that we can do inside of a cell. Very good. So now we know how our turns could be. So let's say that I'm going to turn now. I just showed you an example of another function. So now we're going to do the turn since we know that we can do it. Okay? Okay. We're on the edge and we made the turn. Okay? And then I'm going to go into the other cell. Okay? Okay, and that puts me in the other cell. Okay, so that's where we're at now. Okay, but so we're in the other cell, and that's all I want to say. But we're going to go into another direction that way. But that was a big deal. I now want you to keep in contact with, just keep your mind on that. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind when you're doing this is that it's in your mind. We have the formula, it's real in our mind, and we're making something real now from our mind to outside, okay, to where other people can see it, okay? So that was art. So we just did we worked a lot with the function, okay? Oh, another thing I want to say is, because the reason why I brought out this in your mind is that it's going to correct itself, okay? It's not perfect, okay? This thing will correct itself. Like you saw me, don't look at how I'm doing it, and before you know it, when we finish this thing, it's going to correct itself, okay? It's going to make corrections. The formula makes the corrections. The formula, the thing about in the mind, the formula is alive. It's not like a formula that that you put on a piece of paper. This formula updates to correct things, okay? So as we go through walking through this squared, we're going to be perfecting our function. You notice I didn't even know that I could go around like that in a function, but like I said, the mind makes corrections in its live function. So its live formula makes corrections to perfect the function. And that's all we have for today. That was so much. Thank you.